Okay, it is Monday, February 24th. Yes, I sound a little better today. I feel a lot better. I'm excited about this show. We're gonna have a strong week this week. I walked outside this morning, 36 degrees. It felt like 100 for how cold it's been here in Queens, New York. We've got a lot to get into today. We're going to get into the biggest games from yesterday, the biggest games that happened yesterday, the biggest stories that happened yesterday. We'll get into NFL mock drafts. We have Joel Embiid news. We've got Ovi Watch. This is the Early Game Podcast. Listen to the show in the mornings on your commute, whenever and wherever, so you can be a part of today's sports conversations. Let's go. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We'll start the show a little differently today, and we're going to do this every day. It's going to be a new segment. We're just going to call it Yesterday's Slate. And we'll start every morning first discussing the noteworthy games across all of sports from the day before. The ones that caught my eye. The ones generating the most noise. The ones with crazy player performances. And so, to accompany new with new, we will also, for the first time, on this program, as March nears, we are going to venture into college hoops. It is our first encounter with men's college basketball. And don't worry, we'll speak about the women too. Conference tournaments are right around the corner, which will be great. And that means March Madness is in our grasps. So let's begin in the Big East yesterday. We had the two-time reigning champions, UConn Huskies, taking on this year's college basketball darlings, the St. John's Red Storm. And this was going to be a big test for the Johnnies. They came into this game first place in the Big East at 15-2. They were ranked 10 in the country, but the question was, could they fend off again the UConn Huskies, who are unranked? They came into this game as the 4 seed in the Big East, 10-6. And so, as the Johnnies look to solidify themselves, the St. John's looks to solidify themselves in the Big East, and as a player come March for the Big East title, and ultimately to make a run in the NCAA tournament in Natties, would they be able to one last time, they already beat UConn a couple weeks ago, but would they be able to one last time in their own house in Madison Square Garden beat the Huskies? UConn got off to a hot start, but ultimately St. John's did what they do and went on to beat UConn 89-75 to hold on to the top seed in the Big East. Kadari Richmond and Zuby Ejiofor led the Johnnies with 18 points apiece. Zuby has been a spectacular big man for the Johnnies this season. And Kadari Richmond is a jump shot away from being a special NBA talent. He gets to the hoop and finishes as good as I've seen any NBA prospect in a long, long time. As a smaller player, as a guard, you don't see players like that able to finish at the rim in the way Kadari Richmond has the knack to when he runs into contact, when he needs to make acrobatic moves in odd spaces on the floor. The only thing he is missing is a jump shot. But man, let's talk about this St. John's team for a second. This team is made for March. Look, yesterday they hit 8 3-pointers. They were 8 for 19 from 3-point. This was considered a fantastic shooting night for them. RJ Lewis hit. He had 3 3-pointers. He was 3 for 6. Davon Smith had 2. Aaron Scott had 2. So they were getting shooting from all around. The issue with this St. John's team, and it will be moving forward, is if they're one-dimensional, so if they're only able to if they're only able to, pummel their way to the hoop and be physical the way Kadar Richmond is, but cannot shoot. And in a way, the team as a whole is a embodiment of what Kadar Richmond's game is exactly. And they have a hard time shooting, especially a hard time shooting three. They had Brady Dunlap, who's out for the year, who was their best shooter, and now he's gone. RJ Lewis is their other good shooter, but he has not been great and he has been hurt. RJ was 4 for 18 from the field yesterday, and he had 3 3-pointers. If this team can shoot in ways that they were able to yesterday against UConn, again, that was going 46% from the field and 42% from 3-point. They are a dangerous team in that way. They will hustle you. They will grind you down like no other team can. And that is exactly what you want out of a team come March Madness. Exactly what you want. It is a scary proposition that you are going to need to face a team like that. And so, looking at the bigger picture here, St. John's ranked 10. I think this is a team that can make a big run come Natties. Again, Rick Pitino will have this team ready to play come March Madness. Okay, let's move on to the other game I want to talk about from yesterday. And that brings us back to everybody's favorite segment, Ovi-Watch, Ovi-Watch, Ovi-Watch. And not only was it Ovi-Watch, but we should probably do that bit 3 times. It was a hat trick for the man himself. He is now 13 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. And I saw this stat yesterday. Gino Hard tweeted, Alex Ovechkin is the first ever NHL player to score 200 goals in 3 different decades. Look, he is not near the top 5 best players of all time. Let's get that right. There are many other facets to a hockey player than just scoring. But he still will be the greatest scorer of all time from a pure scoring perspective. And you can decide how much weight you want to put on the ability to score goals. How important is that in a game where the most goals that's scored win the game? For you to decide. I personally think it's a lot of weight. Gretzky has so much over Ovechkin in this debate. Paul Bissonnette went on Part of My Take last week. And he was talking about how all the top players are Canadian. This was in the context of the 4 nations. And then they brought up Ovechkin. And he was making the case how Ovechkin basically just enters the top 10. I'm not going to act like I'm some sort of NHL historian that can go and make my own top 10. But if you go look at the stats, and maybe one day we'll pull it up and we'll have a deeper dive into Ovechkin against Gretzky and the others who are in contention for the best of all time. Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer ever. Is he the best player ever? No. Is he close? No. But he is the best pure scorer of all time. The Caps dominated the Oilers yesterday in that one. They won the game 7-3. Okay. Let's move on now. That was yesterday's slate. And now we move on to the NFL. We had the Super Bowl just about 2 weeks ago, but it is crazy to me how quickly we turn the page. We're already moving on to next season and prospects for next season and what teams will look like. And that means it is already NFL draft season. This is one of those years where teams need quarterbacks, but the draft class, is just not strong at that position. The Athletic released a mock draft this past weekend. And the way I see it, there are currently 6 teams in the top 10 picks who need quarterbacks, whose situation is more than just questionable. The Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets, and the Saints are all beyond just question marks. Some have actually zero prospect for what their quarterback situation will be, and we'll get to that. But there are some who at least have some inkling of an idea, and if they didn't draft anybody, there would be viable situations for who their quarterback would be. So the Browns, for example, they have Deshaun Watson on their roster, but he has an Achilles injury last year and was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when he played. They had Jameis Winston. So maybe they look to run it back with him. So that's an example of a team who at least has kind of some sort of optionality when it comes to who will be their quarterback. No, Deshaun Watson's not an option. But they can say to themselves, let's bridge a year and run it back with Deshaun Watson if and when he's healthy. They could, in theory, say that. And again, they could run it back with Winston. Now, the Saints, they have Derek Carr. So maybe Kellen Moore likes him and tries to run it back with Derek Carr. But the question remains, do they want to change it up? Is Kellen Moore going to want a fresh slate? Is he going to want to choose who his quarterback is? And so the Saints are another example of they're not in dire need of a quarterback, but they're a team in the top 10 who would make sense. No one will question if they did draft one. The Titans are similar in the way that they have Will Levis. So they have somebody who has started games on their roster. And in theory, they could run it back with Will Levis and no one would even think twice. Well, they'd think twice, but they would understand, considering what this draft class is. But the other 3 teams, the Giants, the Raiders, and Jets, literally have nobody of note. Now, let's remember one thing. The Titans and the Raiders were within those 6 teams in terms of betting odds of landing Aaron Rodgers. The Raiders were tied for the best odds at plus 300, and the Titans were tied for the 4th best odds at plus 400. So we could kind of, seeing as the Raiders are a realistic landing spot for Aaron Rodgers, the teams that are now most desperate for a quarterback in the draft, and in my mind have zero direction at the moment for where they will go. Right, because the Raiders have a direction in theory with Aaron Rodgers according to Vegas. So there are only 2 teams left. Those are the Jets and the Giants. Those teams have no alternative to adding somebody. Aaron Rodgers will obviously not be the quarterback of the New York Jets. And the Giants are not linked to him at all, according to Vegas. So keeping all that in mind, let's look at this mock draft that was released this past week by The Athletic. And let's see what they predicted will happen. And I was shocked who they had going number 1 overall. At number 1, they had the Tennessee Titans taking Travis Hunter. And I agree with this. I agree that he is the best player in this draft. And the best player in the draft should be taken number 1. Even when your team does not have a quarterback, when there is no consensus best quarterback in a draft, and the quarterback class is overall considered to be weak, Draft the best player available. On top of that, players like Travis Hunter do not come around often. He is elite as a wide receiver. He's an elite route runner. He's got great hands. He's very smart and very savvy. Again, not an X's and O's podcast. But on top of that, he plays the cornerback position, so he gives a different perspective as a wide receiver. He is already offering you a unique attribute about himself. Now, I'm not saying he should play both sides of the ball in the NFL, but it has to help seeing the game from both sides. In that perspective, it has to help. And so even though the Titans need to upgrade at quarterback, I think Travis Hunter is the right choice. And again, this opens them up. The Tennessee Titans, this opens them up to bring in Aaron Rodgers. And again, they can, in theory, get by with Will Levis for another season. And maybe they say, I can't believe I'm saying this, maybe they say, let's see if Will Levis could be a dog with Travis Hunter as his receiver. Let's be honest. Travis Hunter elevated Shedeur Sanders. So maybe the Titans decide, let's see if we could center our team instead of around an elite quarterback. Let's see how much we can do with a average to below average quarterback. And the thing for me that is appealing is you can then wait to see what next year's quarterback ends up looking like. And this kind of goes the same for a couple of teams in this top 10. And speaking of another team to wait to see what happens next year, let's move on to the Cleveland Browns. And the Athletic here had them taking Abdul Carter at number 2. He's the edge rusher out of Penn State. So now 2 picks in, they had 2 teams who need a young quarterback, neither of them taking one in the draft. And again, this speaks volumes about this quarterback class. And if I were a Jets, Giants, Raiders fan, I would be worried. All of these teams need young quarterbacks. Maybe not the Raiders as much. So as a Jets and Giants fan, I would be worried. It is I wish I could dive into the psychology of drafting, right? You have these 2 teams, the Titans and the Browns. No one would blink an eye if Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders dropped below those first 2 picks. If they took Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter with the first 2 picks, no one would even think twice. They'd say these are 2 great players. They decided to go with them. They valued them more. But when it gets a little bit later, and you have Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward still available, and your hand is almost forced and yet you need a quarterback, and it's a little bit later in the first round in the top 10, and they're still available, what do you do? What do you do? And the next pick we get to is the Giants. So what do they do? What do the Giants do at number 3 if they're not so hot on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, but they're both there? And the Athletic had the Giants here taking Cam Ward. And I think this is notable for 2 reasons. 1, they were linked so heavy to Shedeur Sanders all offseason. Think about what that has to do to Shedeur Sanders' stock if after Shedeur Sanders wore Giants cleats in a college football game, in his last college football game ever. He so clearly wants to play for the Giants. Yet they take Cam Ward over him. What does that say about Shedeur Sanders? And 2, this is what the Athletic writers see as being the most realistic for the Giants at 3. Not Shedeur, not another player, but they think that they are going to take the gamble on Cam Ward. Now, the article mentions the Giants signing a veteran quarterback for Ward to sit behind to develop before being the starter. I don't know, man. This seems really odd to me. The Giants have so many areas to address. Why waste the pick on Cam Ward if he is such a question mark? This goes for both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And speaking of Shedeur Sanders, The Athletic has him going fourth to the Raiders. So again, if you think he is capable of going there, fine, draft him. But as the Raiders, you also have a lot of positions to fill. So if he is not good enough to be your starting quarterback this year, do not waste the pick. There are plenty of other good players to draft. And again, speaking of Shedeur Sanders, yesterday it was reported he's not going to take part in the NFL Combine. Buddy, do you think you have that right to not take part in the Combine? Do you think you're just that good? That is such a red flag for me. We're going to get obviously a lot more dive a lot deeper, especially as more information comes out and more rumors about where teams are leaning comes out. But right now they have Shedeur to the Raiders. And you have to think, does that open the door for Dion down the road once Pete Carroll's done to become the head coach there? Okay, let's move on. So for the Jets, at number 7, they have them taking Tet McMillan, the wide receiver. If you think this is the right move, if you think this is the best player that drops to you, once you're the Jets, especially at 7, if Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are off the board, at that point you take the best player on your draft board. That's what the number 7 pick does for you. You take the best player available. They need wide receivers, don't get me wrong. And if they think Tet McMillan is the best player, take him. And then rounding it out, they had Armin Membu taken by the offensive lineman, taken by the Saints at number 9. And so, again, you come back to what should all of these teams do at quarterback? I think that every team here has a clear option besides for the Browns and the Jets. The Titans can run it back with Will Levis. The Giants can draft Cam Ward, and the Athletic is saying they would sign a veteran quarterback. Okay, I don't know who that would be. Shedeur Sanders and the Raiders. And Derek Carr to start for the Saints. So what do the Jets and what do the Browns do at quarterback this season? The Jets can, in theory, start Tyrod Taylor. See what he can do with Tet McMillan. The Browns would maybe tank another year and see what they could do in next year's class. But it is going to be a fun next 2 months leading up to the draft. I'm sure there will be a lot more information, especially after the Combine. Okay, let's move on. We've got a couple more things to talk about here. Yesterday, Shams Charania broke the news that Joel Embiid is going to get consulting from a doctor regarding second opinions for his knee. So the article read like this: the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid are consulting doctors and considering alternative options such as surgery for his injured left knee, sources told ESPN on Sunday. Both sides have hoped for progress in Embiid's condition, but his determination to play and current treatments, including regular injections, sources said, have not led to any improvement. 3 words: shut him down. Do what we can so we can see Joel Embiid play again at a high level. Look, I'm on record on this show as being a massive Joel Embiid hater. I've called him out for not playing. He's clearly injured and is playing through a tough injury. Why don't you take the rest of this season and next season and sit? Just sit down. Do what you need to do to get healthy. He is 30 years old now. Come back at 32. in the 2027 season, the 2026-2027 season, and have a strong second half to your career. Get whatever surgery you need. Get whatever treatment you need. Get better. Ultimately, we all want to see you be good. You are the process. A process that started, what now? It's almost 10 years ago. Get good, get better. If you're going to sit half the season, you might as well get the surgery and sit the whole season. There is no reason not to. If I'm Joel Embiid, I am doing whatever I can, taking whatever time I need at full length. Don't give me a half of an effort and play half the games. Why don't you get healthy and play every game? I know the pigs are flying that I'm giving a take that I feel kind of, I know you can hear the kind of the sympathy in my voice. I feel kind of bad for the guy. And finally, the story that I want to cover over in baseball was that Justin Ishbia, who is the son of Matt Ishbia, and owner of the Suns, that he wants to up his stake in the Chicago White Sox. He initially was going to put in a bid for the Minnesota Twins, but now what he is intending on doing is upping his stake, his minority stake in the Chicago White Sox, with the ultimate goal of buying the majority off of Jerry Reinsdorf and becoming the full-time owner, the majority owner of the Chicago White Sox. And I have to say, as a Mets fan, who had endured so many years of Will Pond and bad ownership, there is light. White Sox fans, there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is exactly what you want. Be patient. Your time will come where your horrible owner lets go of his team, and finally you have a competent leadership team who will put a good product on the field. Okay, that's a show. Make sure you are following on Spotify, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, follow on X. This is the Early Game Podcast. Tomorrow we will do whatever happened today in sports. Have a wonderful day.